Hi class, I'm going over your three paragraph critiques, and I thought it might be helpful to you to hear some voice commentary on the critique assignment. It can be tricky. So on your screen you should see the actual assignment, and I'm going to move from that to the review guide or a copy of the review guide to just kind of give you a better sense of this paper. First of all, I think it's helpful to think about this paper in it's 5 chunks. So I want to focus right here. You're writing a 4 to 5 page critique, and you really can't do it in less than 4 pages well. So sometimes I know students are tempted to write a short paper, but in my mind, if you turn in a 3 page paper, that's a full letter grade deduction, not including the normal deductions. So you're probably looking at, an A paper, what could have been an A paper, being a B or a C. So try to write the full length of the paper. You really do want to look at the sample provided in your textbook. It is helpful in sequence to academic writing. If you would like another sample, one that maybe a student has done well in the past, I could try to find one of those. Just contact me via email. But what are the 5 segments that are going to appear in your paper? You're going to have an introduction, okay, and you're going to introduce an article or a song. I've seen a lot of people do the Christian song option in the past, and it's turned into a very interesting exercise. I would advise you not to pick a song that's your favorite, because it might end up not being your favorite by the end. Well, although some people have found that it actually still is. So what we found is some of the Christian songs really did stand up to having logical thinking and being well supported. And some did not, because they weren't designed to do that, or some did not because they have poor theology. So approach that if you're that kind of thinker and you like to look at how Christianity represents itself. But if not, feel free to stick with one of the articles we've read thus far. Your introduction should state the author's main argument, what you think the author is trying to do in this essay. What is his argument? Not an assessment of it, just what you think it is. Provide background material to help your reader understand the relevance or appeal of the passage or of the article. Um, when was it written? What is the context? Is there any kind of cultural or historic moment that positions this essay well? Okay. Then the next part you go to is a summary, which is what we worked on in the last paper. And what's important here to remember is that in Comp 2, the skills are sequential. So we really worked on summary. Go back and look at the notes that you put on your final paper. A lot of you did not revise between the intermediate draft and the final. I really do look to see that you've revised, and I try to give you meaningful commentary. So you might want to go back and look at that. Um, at any rate, do not forget or do not leave behind the skills you learned in summary writing. Remember to use representative examples, key examples, and salient quotes. This summary portion should probably take about a page or so of your paper, not much more. Note this, it says to end the summary by evaluating how well the article or song meets the aim set forth by its thesis, main idea, or theme. Okay, so to connect that, in the introduction, you state what you think the author's main argument was. But at the end of the summary, we see a sentence that evaluates how well it met the aim of that argument or the aim of that main idea. If you do a song, you might not think the song has an argument, but it has a main idea, it has a theme. So there's 2 distinct iterations in the critique of the author's main idea, purpose, or argument. At the end of the introduction, and then at the end of the summary, I need to see that evaluation added to what you think is their main argument or idea. So that's really important. After you finish with the summary, you move on to the assessment of the presentation. What I really want to point out here is the assessment of the presentation is distinct from the response to the presentation. I want to see these segments be distinct and different. In the assessment of a presentation, you evaluate the validity of the author's presentation, how the author communicated its ideas. So what they did to communicate their ideas. You are not yet commenting on if their ideas are actually good. So what are that's why I say is keep this distinct from your points of agreement or disagreement. And this is a very common error. Critique is a very natural form of expression for most of us, so we fall into evaluating ideas before we look at how they evaluated their ideas or how they presented their ideas. I think this is very important for us, particularly as Christians. Before we move into agreeing or disagreeing, we should understand if the person actually presented their ideas in a logical, clear, and trustworthy manner. Yeah. I'm going to just read this to you. Comment on the author's success in achieving his or her purpose by reviewing 3 to 4 points. So I'm going to be looking for, you're discussing 3 to 4 ways of assessing the author's presentation. You can say, is the information significant? Is it accurate? And a good way to check accuracy is to cross-check it with 2 to 3 other sources. This is also, if you're one of those writers who thinks, I don't know how to write this much. Well, this is a great way to beef up your essay. Cross-check it with 2 to 3 other sources and see if what the point you're discussing, if other authors, other experts would concur or disagree. Has the author used and interpreted information fairly? Do they have logical fallacies? You had to read about those in the sequence chapters. Do they have, argument ad hominem? Do they misinterpret statistics? This can be another excellent point for your paper. Has the author argued logically? Again, you can use fallacies here. Is it in good order? Look at the order of the content. Is the paper clear and easy to follow? Is the essay easy to follow? Can you understand? Is he building toward a particular point? Is there a moment in the essay where you feel it lacks coherence? This is a good thing to analyze when considering assessment of presentation. Has the author explained but not argued? I asked you to, I guess the exception to this would be if you did the song, but if you pick one of the essays you used, if their purpose was to argue, you want to look for that. If their purpose was more to explain, you might need to take a little bit of a different approach right here. Are the terms well defined? Does the essay use any terms? Does the author assume that we understand the terms and maybe they shouldn't? Maybe the author should assume that we don't understand the term. Or is there a definition provided and you feel like there should be more? In the Eureka hunt, there are terms used. Does the author assume that we understand them, or does the author provide us with a definition? And that can be a weakness or a strength either way. It really is up to the way you're reading it. We talked about coherence. Are the examples sufficient? A lot of times students will say, there are too many examples, and they bog down my reading. What you want to, for example, the example of the fireman, does that support the point of the Eureka hunt? Does the author use enough points to help you get his meaning? Does the author use too many? This is a way to assess presentation. Does the author demonstrate a solid understanding of his or her audience? You want to look at the little blurb before the essay is published, or go online and figure out, where was this essay first published? Was it in the New York Times? Was it in a scholarly journal? What kind of audience does it assume? And does the author do a good job of meeting the needs of that audience? You want to look at diction level. If it's an article published in a scientific journal, it's okay that the author then assumes that his readership would understand certain scientific terms or certain people popular in the scientific discourse. So this is another thing you can do. If the text you are working with is a song, use language that describes the rhetoric of music. You can describe its pacing, its timbre, volume, pitch, key or key changes. So this would be rhetoric of song that is distinct from the rhetoric of an essay, but it gives you a way to look at how the song achieves what it does, the methods that it uses to achieve what it does, still not agreeing with its ideas. You can discuss also the language of music, verse, lyric, refrain, and bridge. Okay, so this is really the new component added in this round of writing, assessing presentation. After you have clearly closed this section, move on to the response to the presentation. And this is where you operate most naturally as a thinker and a student. Choose 2 to 3 views that you agree or disagree with. But don't just say this is a lovely idea or this is a rotten idea. You need to discuss your reasons for disagreement and disagreement. What the author had to say. When possible, tie these reasons to assumptions. What did the author assume to come up with these ideas? And you not need to draw on 2 to 3 outside sources to support your ideas. So there needs to be some research to say, not only do I agree with this, but other people do. Not only do I disagree, but other people do. I would count an outside source as personal experience. You could say my personal experience bears out the ideas presented in this essay. You could use the experience of another. So I'm not looking for you to have a heavy research component here, but in this essay, it is very likely you're going to have to use other sources, either in cross-checking information right here, when you cross-check information to see if it is accurate in the assessment of presentation, or when you are supporting your own agreement or disagreement. If you need any help finding sources that can do this, please let me know. The fifth section of your essay is the conclusion, and it does have some specific requirements. State your conclusion about the overall validity of the piece. How valid is it? How important are its ideas? And here's where you assess the author's success at achieving his or her aims. It's somewhat of a restatement of what you set forth in your evaluation at the end of the summary, evaluating how well the article or song met its aims. So you are again stating what it did and did not do well. One way to do this specifically is to remind the reader of at least one weakness and one strength. Obviously, you probably will be heavier on one side. You might have one weakness, but two or three strengths, or two or three weaknesses and one strength. So your conclusion is again an assessment of how well the author achieved his or her intended aims, but it's developed a little bit more than at that final than it is in that final sentence at the end of the summary. Okay. Some grammatical points to focus on for this paper. Just a quick recap. Quote, paraphrase, and summary, which are skills of the summary paper. Signal phrases, these are the ways that you introduce quotes. You don't want to always say the author says or quotes. Just Google that phrase, signal phrase, and you'll come up with several options. Populated prose, which comes from the well-crafted text, and I do look for this. Parallelism and commentary, which is where you're discussing the quotes that you select. Word choice and correct MLA format. All right, I just hope that this gives you a better overview of this paper and what I'm looking for. And I hope if you have any questions or comments, you'll contact me. Thank you so much.